Negative newsletter yesterday trying to get us back.
You could probably Google Sally Tisdale because she's writing about it right now.
Thank you.
Oh,
Sure. Wow.
I killed it.
Hello, my friend.
There was a contact in there, and I couldn't tell. I didn't. I just didn't want to reach out to a random person who had already talked to someone. Okay, we just want to make sure they know that was actually at the so I'll reach out to the contacts that I have then
We were
from
sitting
this.
there a year before. I was sitting beside my mother's bed watching her gaslight her air, apparently sleeping.
I just pulled the email from, I'm not sure if it was a contact or if it's Tim. They were saying they're looking for
Comment about
Just what it was. I mean,
So I decided to try and come around.
recognizing it, honoring it.
Margaret's pardon.
For you as well. Turn down, sir. You come home. Turn down, sir. Check the chocolate on
Thank you for your talk today about equanimity. I appreciate that. I found it very helpful to me personally.
Could you speak aloud?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, he can.
Will you?
I will. I definitely will. From now on.
That's okay. Just now is good.
I can do it. So I have actually a two-part question. They both relate to equanimity and how to practice with equanimity. One is about contentment and the suffering of other people. So my own benefit, I don't know if that's, my own genuine benefit, I think I've had some challenges in that regard, but being mindful of my own benefit, sort of as that is understood in general terms, I probably have not had much trouble with that. It's the genuine benefit. Caring for the benefit of others, I want to do that. I have a lot of intention in that regard. But being content with the suffering of others has been recently overwhelming me. Members of my family, and since the election, members of the entire human race. I've just been suffering, over the suffering of other people. So I wanted to ask a question about equanimity and practicing with the suffering of other people and not being overwhelmed.
Yeah, that's a good.
The second part comes out of the mind training study group. And this is almost exactly the same question I asked Ringotoku when he was here, but I guess I need to ask it again. In mind training study group, we often talk about illness. You said illness, and earlier in your conversation that's an assumption. I may be misstating that. But while we're here in the study group, it sounds to me like we often are talking about the ways that we behave our illness, the way we're manifesting that illness. And sometimes it can seem like it's just a litany of sicknesses, actually, because we're talking about the way with our minds we're causing suffering for ourselves and others. And then it comes back to Pema Chodron's conversation about the need to be compassionate with yourself. So I'm looking for some advice or instruction on working with equanimity and having the urgency in your practice without beating yourself up about that. So those are the twofold questions. Suffering of others, how to work with that, how to be content with that. I haven't found out how to do that.
So, good questions. Good. We have a good conversation. It might be helpful to start with a question. When we talk about equanimity, let's ask the question: what role does judgment have to do with equanimity? You're not snoring, so I'll figure you're awake.
We're all saying, mm-hmm. Yes.
Well, yes is not enough of an answer. What role does it play?
Massive.
It what?
Huge.
Massive.
A massive role.
Interrupted.
What does that mean? What role?
Pervasive?
Just big role, you know. It's not good. Say, what role?
It's so extensive.
Extensive?
Yeah, I find in me, if I drop judgment, my equanimity can really, I can find it in a place.
It's really what?
It seems really pervasive, like if I can drop judgments,
If you can drop it, then what?
then the equanimity is much more attainable. It seems almost they're one and the same.
Judgment and equanimity?
Lack of judgment.
Lack of judgment
Yeah,
and
not
equanimity.
having judgment. Like discernment.
Well, I don't know. A corpse probably doesn't have judgment or equanimity. No, so maybe not quite the same.
It's related to attachment and aversion, right?
Attachment and aversion, judgment, equanimity, of course, especially in relationship to equanimity, attachment and aversion are kind of the active judgment, right? Mm-hmm. It's a kind of, in some cases we might say it's an unskillful kind of discrimination. Not helpful. Marcy, yeah.
I was just going to say that judgment feels like the automatic state, like the automatic response of our mind without the thing that just happens, the judgment.
Judgment.
Right. And that somehow being able to view that's happening, that judgment's happening, would be the first thing I would have to do before I would even be able to come near anything like equanimity, I guess.
Can I say that, you know, when people are suffering, I actually don't want to not notice that. I don't know that I want to have equanimity. You know, I don't. I don't know that when people are abjectly suffering, I don't want that to not touch me. I don't want to back away from that. I don't want to go at arm's length from it. But I guess my profound instruction to myself just now is that I'm exactly doing that. You know, I'm pushing it away because I don't want
What's the it?
The suffering.
The suffering.
What's the difference between pain and suffering?
Well, that's a good question.
If he's feeling that his family
A little
person's...
louder, Sally, so they can hear you.
He is, Tim, if you are feeling a family member's pain, are you feeling their pain or are you suffering from that?
Yeah.
Seems to me that's where the separation, or the
Yeah, I'm
what helps
definitely
is if I
feeling
can
their
feel it
pain.
as pain.
You bet. Definitely.
So you think that? Do you think that equanimity somehow disconnects you from the suffering of others?
No.
That's what it sounded like.
Yeah, maybe.
Fix it.
That's not
Well, I mean, watching, like when my knee's killing me, I could suffer, or I could say, there's pain in my knee, and I can watch that pain and be with it. And that's what I guess I'm simplistically responding.
Well, it's interesting that a common teaching on the four immeasurables is that without equanimity, you cannot experience compassion and loving kindness. So I think the equanimity here, there's a misunderstanding if we think that it's a way to avoid the experience. Because basically what we've said then is there's no way out here. We can neither have the equanimity nor can we have the four immeasurables. It's like it doesn't work. But the four immeasurables is a prerequisite to loving kindness, compassion, and that elusive one we haven't talked about yet, joy. I mean, so far it doesn't sound like we deserve joy, but we're going to have to look at that too.
Especially Tim.
Tim did it. He took away all our
Dang
joy.
it.
Yeah.
Well, in fact, that's my biggest attraction. Joy. For sure.
Why would it be taught that in order to manifest compassion and joy and loving kindness, one would need equanimity? What's the role?
So, the way that I sort of think I understand it, it's like when I go see people in their homes, I don't get to pick who I go see, especially now in the role I have now. I open my assignments and they're mostly people I've never seen before. And in every political stripe, or wealth or poverty. And if I don't let my opinions and stuff just drop at the door as much as I can't really be helpful for them because I'm putting my stuff on them. So I don't say I do it perfectly, but that's been a helpful lesson for me to sort. I mean, I don't completely understand the four immeasurables. That would be a reasonable thing to say. But it's helped me work with them more when I think I have to be just this, like, neutral in the sense that I'm just present for you. What do you need?
Mary. I'm not Mary. Sally. You still had something? You had your hand up?
I'm just touching my cheek.
Oh, you just don't do that.
Lynn.
Well, Lynn,
Yeah, this,
okay.
and like, Tim, I am so resonating with, because I was going to say something similar. I've got my nephew who is just diagnosed with stage 4 esophageal cancer. He's 30 years old. His, and so, and then the world under Trump. And those two are, it is really, it's almost like I feel, you know, like contentment is like almost this weird betrayal. If I'm not suffering in some way with them, then I'm not doing enough. So there's this weird, which I know makes no sense, but it's sort of my sympathetic suffering, the sympathetic joy. I've got sympathetic
Suffering.
my nephew is the one that's
God increases
my nephew who's the one who has real pain
in the world.
right? His diagnosis is doing the best of all of us because he knows he has no other option but to accept what is. The rest of us, I think, are struggling with wanting it to be different, and that's the challenge, I guess. So anyway,
You know, it's interesting that it's often the case when you read the stories of great bodhisattvas and saints. A piece of it often is that's included in the story is that the compassion of that bodhisattva for others is not focused on their suffering. It's focused on the cause of the suffering. So the suffering is just an experience. The attachment to being free of it, the aversion for having it, all of the projections and things around it, not only from the person who's suffering, but from the people who know that person, who put their projections on it too. All of those projections are a kind of massive judgment, of course. And the judgment itself, I think everyone here would say, one of the most uncomfortable things in this life is to be judged. For someone to judge you, if you know they're judging you, that's a very difficult situation. And I think that it's also often true, even when the judgment is positive. But in a more subtle way. We can think like, oh, I really like it, you know, they like me, they say that. But actually, you often know internally it's incorrect. You know, the positive judgment and the negative judgment are like, actually, that's not my experience of who I am. And so we have a certain sense, even when it's kind of pleasant, then it just inspires us to attachment. And when it's negative, we're pushed in the direction of aversion. And the attachment and the aversion are actually the root of the suffering. So when we want to free people of the outer appearance of suffering, that's a nice thing to hold, but it does not remove the root cause. Even when you can remove it. So it's worthy of contemplating that instruction, I think, that the primary focus for compassion really needs to be on the cause of suffering. And the example that I like is you wake up one morning and you have an abscessed tooth and you're in a lot of pain. And you call the emergency dentist place and you get an appointment. You get the appointment. Suddenly you're happy to have an appointment to go see the dentist who's going to cause you pain. But it's because you know that pain is followed by its alleviation. So even you're sitting in the chair and they're doing things to you that hurt, but you understand the relationship between all of that and being free of that pain. So it's not just the discomfort that is the suffering. In fact, one might say, I think more accurately, the discomfort has almost nothing to do with the suffering itself. It's just something to ponder. I think most people would find that completely ridiculous. But it's totally my experience in my own mind and my own body. The things that cause me to suffer the most are the things that most people would say are the source of happiness.
Stop me there.
Say it again?
It'll come around again.
Couldn't use bad news.
Yeah, right.
Well, I wanna just go back to what Lama Michael said
Oops.
before, what I think Lama Michael said before we meditated, which is, and this is this goes more to Tim and Lynn's question. We don't meet what rises in us with equanimity. And equanimity isn't backing off, it's being right there. Right there. But like a calm person who's right there and says, I see this, I see it, I see it, I see I hate it, I sit with the hate. You meet the hate of your experience with the same equanimity. Is it starting to make sense? You meet the suffering itself with the same equanimity you meet joy with. And so the beginning seems to be meeting your own experience. Your internal experience is, it feels like, as you ask the question, you want to skip that internal experience and help and stop their suffering. But in skipping that, we are completely ineffective. So, for example, when I go in a room with my mother dying, if I'm bringing in, oh my God, I want my mother out of this suffering, what's that like for her? I'm not there. It goes back to what Mary said. What's that like for her that I come in with all that angst? And I come in because I haven't sat with what is rising in me. When I sit with what rises in me, try and meet it, try and see it, try and go, okay, I hate this, and I hate that I hate it, and on and on. But it starts calming down. Then I go in with some space, and the person can use that space however they need. And it can be so surprising to you how they want to use it. It's not your helping agenda. I have a Zen priest friend who has this phrase I use often, the helping hand strikes again. The first time she said it, she came in to get her tea, which usually is in some place, and someone had moved it, helping, like, I'm going to clean that cup or whatever. And she's going, where's my tea? And it's like, the helping hand has striked again. And we all do that. Out of that urge it's a beautiful urge, I really want this suffering to end. You say that, we can feel your heart in it. And with Lynn, we can feel the heart in it, but that's not enough. The wisdom has to come. And that wisdom seems to be tied to seeing all that's going on for you. And that's the self-compassion. You're talking about Pema Chodron saying the self-compassion. You've got to have some compassion for ourselves. We got to. And sit with what the heck is rising up here. So that seems to be working better in all the turmoil, on every level.
Thank you.
It seems that
It's the boundless view is what's missing, and the lack of equanimity, because we just see this small piece. And I wish could you speak to that? And uh-oh. You know, the boundless view. I mean, all of this stuff, which all of us are suffering under the current leadership of our country, and yet having a boundless view, in some ways we can see the selfishness and kind of reflected, and questions about what, and, you know, we don't know the end story of anything, and having that seems to open more a quantumist heart, a quantumist mind, because we don't know. This is just a short time.
Yeah, I think you're you're cracking the door open a little bit into the space where it's possible to explore the bigger thing, which is what we don't know. Because usually when we give rise to compassion, it's about something we know. Like, I know this person is hurting, or this is happening. We know something, and so the compassion's directed on what we know. And often, I think, again, from a spiritual perspective, it's misdirected. So from an ordinary, everyday kindness, which is certainly, in a way, you got to say that's a prerequisite to the deeper things. If you can't even be kind to yourself, for example, really, it's not likely that you're going to be effective with somebody else. So the unbounded perspective, which Kay is raising, is really another step. And it's difficult to hold this, but from our perspective as Buddhists, and maybe others too, but from our perspective as Buddhists, we don't actually have access to the causes and conditions that bring about a certain kind of suffering. So if I eat a half a gallon of ice cream this afternoon and then I'm sick for 3 days, I know exactly why I'm sick for 3 days. But why I did that in the first place is not actually accessible to me. So when did that start? And when I meet somebody on the street and I feel kindly towards them, or I feel afraid of them, whatever it is, I don't have access to why that's there. Why do I have that experience? And that's really a place to focus our own kind of reflexive compassion on ourselves. That we actually don't see these things. And if we look at it really closely and ponder it, I think we have to come to the conclusion, it's almost certain, that we don't understand the causes and conditions at all between events that may have been seeded a very long time ago. Not in this life, not even in countable previous lives. We have no way of knowing. So one could ask the question reasonably, so why are we talking about that? I think it's a very important question. I say that out of my own personal experience. I have had a strong habit of asking the questions when I receive a Dharma instruction or a new practice or something. I find myself asking the question, why are you doing that? Is there something to be gained by that? What is that? What's the effect? What do I get from it? What do other people get from it? If I can't answer that question satisfactorily, for myself, I abandon it. And I've abandoned some of the most precious teachings because I couldn't. So later, they come around again. And when they come around again, the nice thing is that if you've pondered it and looked at what was there before, sometimes the door is open, and when they come around again, you have an aha. That's what it is. But I can't encourage somebody to do something when there is no sense of connection and understanding as to why they would do it. There's a reason to hold the unbounded view, even though none of us understand it. It's like, how are you going to reckon with some action that we would call karma from some previous life that may have occurred millennia ago or more? There's no way to reckon with that. What do I do with that? Mm-hmm. But it's interesting to just hold that view that all of the things that occur to me, the stream of my experience which is flowing, I think I have some sense of what's in that stream. Mm-hmm. But actually, if I step back from it, I have no idea. And the contemplation of it, which is really saying in this case the meditation on that stream of experience, completely changes when you give up thinking that you know what's causing it. Now you're in a totally different place with it. So that's actually, there are many kind of profound teachings around that thing, but the first thing is that we never know what the outcome of anything is going to be, even usually in the next 5 minutes, let alone. So this comes to the place of, first of all, we see suffering. So we can talk a lot about the political thing, but actually it's not particularly unique. It's only just kind of interesting from another perspective. But like all things, all you got to do is project out, let's just say, a century. Mm-hmm. Many of us are not so far away from living a century. And when you look back over like 50 years and you look and see like the pieces in there are very few pieces that you can really definitely connect up. I did this and that happened. Often I did this, then you move on. You don't connect it. And mostly we can't see those connections. In fact, I think if you look closely, you'd say you can never see it. Because there's never an end point. I can have a discussion with somebody because we're having a difficult interpersonal relationship of some kind. So we can sit down and talk about it and feel like, well, that was good. That was a good meeting. But the next day, then I'm thinking, I'm not so sure about what they said. And so, and then that uncertainty plays into more things, and pretty soon you're like a long ways away from where you were before. And then you're back at the table talking about, like, well, what can we do about this? Mm. There's no end to it, just like there's no beginning. So if you can hold that view, that not that there is really no beginning and no end, the important thing is that I can't see it. So how do I act skillfully? You see somebody who's suffering, you want to do something. It's an interesting gambit to start from the perspective, I have no idea why this is here, whether this is ultimately good for this person or bad for this, I just have no idea. So from the perspective of utterly not knowing, now what are you going to do? There are things to do, for sure. And there are situations where you will do something. But when you do that from the perspective of, I don't actually know that this is helpful or not helpful, it changes things. It changes things a lot. And when someone says, I don't want your help, that's like, if you're in the space of I don't know, that's the obvious thing for somebody to say, I don't want your help. As opposed to, it's offensive to tell me that You know, I mean, I drove all the way across town. So, how about a little appreciation? Nurse? Will you get this guy out of here? We don't know. There's a kind of a funny Tibetan story about a situation where a farmer had like this great horse came to him and that horse was valuable, as you know, it was a workhorse and all, and also a horse that you could ride, and so everybody thought, wow, that's fantastic, what an amazing good fortune. And then his son later on falls off the horse and breaks his legs. Everybody says, oh, what terrible fortune. And then the army comes by to conscript all the young men, and they don't take him because his leg's broken. So then it's like, whoa, that's such great good fortune, you know. So there's always, the judgments just kind of like roll with it all the time, as if we actually saw something, and actually all we're seeing is our own projections and identifying it as the truth of something outside. So equanimity plays a huge role in weaving these things together so that we have a sense of, I see something, but I don't actually know. Where did it come from? Where is it going? I want to fix something, but how do you fix it when you don't know what will actually bring about something positive as opposed to negative or neutral? You will still act, but I would propose that in the realm of the question of what is skillful and what is unskillful, you're far more likely to do something skillful if it comes from the place of, I don't actually know that this is the best thing to do. You'll still do something. And it may, in the short run or the long run, result in something really good or not. But even when it doesn't result in something really good, we still don't know what will result from that point forward. So this is a huge piece, I think, from my own perspective, a huge piece in the Dharma of how do you navigate the uncertainty? How do you do that? I think that we can do that more easily when we look at ourselves and come to the place of, I have lots of projections and ideas, but I can see that I don't actually have access to what my various actions lead to. And now you're going to have to do something in that context. And that's very uncomfortable. We're used to carrying around this kind of certainty. I won't put all of the four-letter words on it that, you know, conveniently describe it, but it is a certainty which is probably, as often as not, a cause of just more suffering. And it's a piece of our path that is a piece of the unbounded view, takes us into a realm of uncertainty. And you can't just do nothing. You will do something because you do feel for others. So you will do something. It's very hard to do something that feels very important and you actually have not a good idea where that's going to lead. And then, in that space, to decide what it is that is going to happen. So, you know, it's one of the things that we say about great realization and insight is that when you encounter a difficult situation, well, let's just put it in the realm of the Buddha or someone who's enlightened, there is no pondering what to do. There is no pondering what to do. Now, most of us could say, yeah, I never think about anything, I just react. I must be enlightened.
Good news.
But it's also not a reaction. It's really, it could be a reaction, like your child runs into the traffic in the street. You don't ponder it, you just do something. that also is a reaction. One could say, well, reactions are helpful sometimes. But generally speaking, what's difficult is that we don't know. And we are going to do something. Or not. We might decide not to. We don't know that somebody's suffering is actually helpful. It's, I don't know how many have this experience, but sometimes if I get sick and I'm really bedridden, there's a certain joy about it because you don't have to apologize to anybody for not showing up. It's an opportunity to enjoy ill health. And yet, while you're attempting to enjoy ill health, people are trying to fix you. Take this. Take this. If you take all the things that people give you, you'll really be sick. So, that's there too. And then you offend people. So sometimes you just take what people give you. They're trying to be helpful, and so you take it instead of saying, "Get it out of here." Somebody, yeah, Marcy.
I just want to say, because I was really struck by the teaching this morning about the equanimity within yourself and what's coming up internally. And it made me think of an experience that I had like 2 weeks ago or a week ago or something where I was very close to a panic attack that lasted all day long, just overwhelming anxiety. And I was very aware of how much I had this aversion. I don't want this. I don't want this feeling. I don't want this feeling. How can I get rid of this feeling, But then I'm like trying to use all my like Buddhist-y tools, to get rid of it. I'm going to breathe. I'm going to be mindful. I'm going to say a prayer. I'm going to do all this stuff, right? Loving kindness to myself. And I ended up calling somebody. And it was helpful, and I was thinking about like how you help people, like I really didn't want him to do anything. I didn't want him to tell me what to do. I didn't want him to fix it. I just wanted him to be in that space with me. And that was really helpful. And I think the main thing that helped at that point was I just held this idea of impermanence in my mind, finally. I was just like, okay, I didn't feel better, but it was like, I have this anxiety. It may just last all day, but it's not going to last forever. And I just I don't know, I just tried to be kind to myself around it. And something about the impermanence thing helped a little bit, I think. And sure enough, like the next day I woke up and I was feeling better, but I still have this sense of like, oh God, I hope that never comes back. But so sitting in the meditation today, and I guess it made me think of how I could see like how useful that is to do it in formal practice, so that it might be a more natural response to those feelings, that instead of reacting or trying to get rid of stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, and then of course you have the alternative to engage in the mind training practice of here I have an experience which I loathe. And how many people are having exactly this experience right in this very moment? So that in itself then opens a kind of a sphere up into some other space. I mean, when you're talking half a dozen billion people, you can pretty much feel confident that there's at least hundreds, if not hundreds of thousands or millions of people who are having this exact experience right now. And then from the mind training perspective, we make this wish, which is actually an heroic wish, that I might take on all of that suffering and experience it, and by so experiencing it, free them of it. Now this is actually compassion for oneself. And so is the bell.
Go on.
I was waiting. Compassion point.
To be continued.
To be experienced.
We'll dedicate the merit. Someday we'll have to talk about what that is.
Merit?
Merit.
By this virtue may I quickly realize Mahamudra and establish all beings without exception in this state.
Thank you. Nice conversation.
If you can stay to help,